Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving straight into Dr. Saheed Opeyemi Adebisi's groundbreaking research on reclaiming human agency in the age of commodified AI. As the world absolutely rushes to integrate artificial intelligence into everything, from how we hire people to how militaries pick their targets, there's a massive, hidden crisis bubbling right under the surface. And it's a crisis that threatens way more than just our privacy. It's threatening our fundamental autonomy as human beings.
So, here is our roadmap. First, we'll cover the extended legal present. Second, the quantification fallacy. Third, surrendering our human agency. Fourth, the rise of digital neocolonialism. Fifth, the global regulatory awakening. And finally, reclaiming our algorithmic sovereignty. Let's get right into it.
Section 1, the extended legal present. We're going to start by looking at the incredibly chaotic environment that modern AI is currently operating in. We really have to ask ourselves, what actually happens when society gambles on technological regulations that literally don't exist yet? Right now, we're seeing incredibly powerful generative AI systems being deployed into critical sectors like healthcare, finance, and public administration. And the crazy part, it's all based on highly innovative but completely legally untested claims. When we commodify AI before putting guardrails in place, we end up creating this incredibly fragile regulatory bubble. It leads to a very dangerous state of what Dr. Adebisi calls normative madness. As you can see, this bubble forms because economic actors are gambling on rules that just aren't there yet. The result? Companies just pump out these voluntary, often contradictory ethical guidelines. It acts as a total smokescreen to hide a super unstable legal foundation. Make no mistake, we are playing a high-stakes game with democratic governance here.
Section 2, the quantification fallacy. Okay, to treat this issue, we first need to diagnose the underlying disease. We need to understand how algorithms actually think about us.
Think about the fundamental danger of treating deeply complex human contexts as rigid statistical data points. Human reality is beautifully messy, right? It's full of nuance, lived experience, and really complicated moral balancing. But machines, they just need numbers. You can't exactly plug a difficult childhood or a nuanced sense of justice into a spreadsheet. This brings us right to the McNamara fallacy. This is the disastrous assumption that whatever you can't quantifiably measure, things like human dignity, historical context, or indirect harm, is simply irrelevant. We are taking a multifaceted human reality, running it through the rigid filter of a black box, and getting an oversimplified number on the other side. This creates a really dangerous illusion of objectivity. We basically start treating educated guesses from an AI as absolute deterministic truths. And when critical human rights are on the line, that is incredibly dangerous. Section 3, surrendering our human agency. Let's look at how the symptoms of this quantification disease actually manifest in the real world when we put these systems in charge. We have to figure out the exact threshold where human oversight totally fails. Tech companies are always promising us that they'll keep a human in the loop to protect our rights. But in practice, human psychology and relentless machine efficiency collide in some very predictable and often tragic ways. This perfectly illustrates the automation bias activation curve. It is wild to see how machine speed completely overwhelms our cognitive capacity. Notice how human engagement absolutely plummets as system speed and scale increase. This modern drive to operate at machine speed pushes us completely to the margins. We just offload our thinking. We go from being active, engaged decision makers to passive rubber stampers, basically just blindly endorsing whatever logic the algorithm spits out. Let's break down how this actually plays out across 3 critical sectors, comparing warm human judgment against cold algorithmic logic. In military targeting, international law actually demands a subjective human commander to weigh contextual care. But an AI system? It reduces life and death to rigid statistical optimization. Or look at human resources. A human hiring manager looks at your holistic, messy potential. An algorithm just relies on historical pattern matching, which, quite frankly, often bakes in proxy discrimination. And in public administration, say processing an asylum claim, a human applies discretionary empathy. The machine completely replaces that with binary categorization and strict mathematical rule enforcement. Across the board, complex human traits are just being flattened. Section 4, rise of digital neocolonialism. Now, we're going to zoom way out to the macro level to examine how this pathology spreads globally. We have to confront whether the modern digital data pipeline is simply mirroring historical patterns of exploitation, particularly in the global south. If a nation is entirely reliant on foreign AI infrastructure, are they actually maintaining their own sovereignty,
Or are they just surrendering it to the vendor state?
Following the flow here, you can see a very modern extraction pipeline. Foreign-built, completely opaque AI infrastructure is being exported to the global south. So you have this inbound importation of surveillance and border tech from foreign vendor states. And in exchange, there's a massive outbound extraction of sensitive domestic data, behavioral patterns, and ultimately digital sovereignty. Nations are adopting this technology without ever seeing the source code or holding data governance rights. It leaves them incredibly vulnerable and dependent.
To really grasp the severity of this, Dr. Adebisi draws a fascinating parallel to biotechnology. We need to start treating unchecked AI infrastructure like an invasive biological agent. Think about it. Just as we require rigorous clinical trials before approving a new drug, we absolutely have to apply rigorous algorithmic diagnostics to AI. We have to take the raw technical data and systematically stress test it for bias, harm, and hallucinations long before deployment. Translating this hard science into clear civic policy is the only way to protect local cultures and legal norms from being totally homogenized. Section 5. The Global Regulatory Awakening. So, now that we've diagnosed the spread and the incredible risks of this black box, let's explore the global treatment plan that's currently underway. Governments are definitely waking up to the fact that unregulated AI commodification is structurally unsustainable. There is a massive regulatory awakening happening. But because the world is so interconnected, this awakening is incredibly disjointed, which forces nations to navigate a really complex matrix of competing legal frameworks. Looking at this fragmented landscape of AI governance, we can clearly see a triad of distinctly different regulatory philosophies. You have the United States, which approaches this with a decentralized, command and control experimentalism that's heavily driven by the free market. Then, the European Union utilizes a comprehensive, risk-based approach, like their AI Act, which is proactively aimed at protecting fundamental rights. And China enforces state-aligned generative AI safety and strict controls to preserve social alignment and state sovereignty. This triad basically forces the rest of the world into a chaotic maze of compliance, depending entirely on whose tech they import. Section 6. Reclaiming our algorithmic sovereignty. Finally, we arrive at the concrete, actionable cure for all of this. What is the actual treatment plan to regain control? Well, we need a defense strategy that moves us from being passive consumers of commodified AI to sovereign architects of our own technological destiny. It is absolutely time to break the dependency on foreign, opaque vendor infrastructure. Here is Dr. Adebisi's clear, 3-step blueprint for defense. Step 1. Pierce the black box. We have to reject the trade secret excuse when fundamental human rights are at stake. Transparency in things like hiring and military targeting is a baseline democratic requirement. Step 2. Prioritize the duty of care. Qualitative human judgment, whether it's an empathetic administrator or a reasonable commander, must strictly supersede cold mathematical optimization. And Step 3. Enforce sovereign autonomy. Nations must invest heavily in local capacity building, native language datasets, and regional governance frameworks to permanently shatter their dependence on foreign vendors. I want to leave you with this final, powerful thought for reflection. Algorithmic sovereignty isn't just some technical achievement. It is the absolute prerequisite for maintaining our political independence in the digital age. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. The future is inevitably going to be automated, but the real question we have to answer is this. As we hand over the keys to the machines, what parts of our humanity are we actually willing to permanently trade away?